good evening all. Not sure if there's anybody here yet, so we'll just give it a few minutes. I'm normally a few minutes late starting, so I think starting this time a little bit ahead may have thrown a few people off. That's if this is working. Something seems to be going slightly jaggedy at the moment, so hopefully it's all going to be okay. Hello, Mr. Miyagi. Can someone please confirm whether or not the stream... Oh, wait a minute, my microphone. Let me get my microphone. That will probably help. There we go. Can someone confirm if the video's working? I seem to be getting a lot of lag here, so I'm not sure if it's just me or whether you are seeing it as well. Anyone else seeing the lag? I might, if it keeps going, I might have to stop and restart this because it seems to be a little bit strange. Clara Beta Snowden, good evening. Hello to you too. Can you let me know whether this is, it is laggy? Okay. Someone's, Darren Corrine saying it is laggy. I'm seeing it being quite laggy, which is a little bit strange and slightly disconcerting. Let me just... Huel! Hello, Huel. Good to see you. Let me just try and restart this and just see how it's going. Just 1 second. Give me a sec. Hopefully I will be right back. Okay, am I back? YouTube seems to say that the stream is bad at the moment, which is obviously not good. But it seems even my local stream seems to be very, very laggy. This is strange. Okay, well, I'll continue anyway. Let's hopefully this is okay, and this is not going to be too much of a problem for people. Is the audio coming out okay? Hopefully the audio is not stuttering too much. That's the main thing, and if that's going okay, then hopefully the rest of it should be fine. So I've got a few people in. Clara Beta Snowden, Darren Corrine, Rails NZ, Huel. Huel Wilson's a friend of mine from university. I've known Huel for, what, 25 odd years now, which is great. So good to see a diverse group of people here. And Miyagi, Darren Corrine, IHI Lake around. Hello. So yes, anyone, can you at least confirm that this is back again, that I am here, because I'm still not sure whether this is actually broadcasting okay at the moment. It seems to be glitching all over the place, and I really don't understand why. Audio's good. Bob's saying the audio's good. Okay, well, let's go ahead with it anyway. So today, the topic I'm going to talk about today is Interledger. Now, I've touched on Interledger a little bit previously, and when I talked about Coil and web monetization. So this is really to talk a little bit more about Interledger, and I'm going to be talking about it from a sort of fairly high-level point of view in terms of what is it, how does it fit into the kind of overall general architecture of things, and you know, what is the purpose of it, what are people using it for, what does it enable us to do. So Interledger came about. It's a protocol that was originally developed by a couple of engineers at Ripple, but has since now been adopted as a W3C standard. So W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. They are the people that standardize a lot of the protocols that are used on the web for things like HTML that's rendered in web pages, JavaScript, and that sort of thing. Actually, I'm not sure if JavaScript was W3C, but it's a similar body that standardizes these things. But the idea being is these standards are open standards that anybody can use, and it means that anybody who adheres to these standards should be able to communicate with anybody else that's adhering to these standards. So we have a standard that is developed called ILP, Interledger Protocol. And the idea behind Interledger Protocol is to be able to interconnect between different payment systems, between different payment networks. And it comes back to the idea of an internetwork. So the internet, as we know it, the internet is short for internetwork, and it was a network that interconnected lots of other smaller networks. So you would have a network run by a university on one side of the planet, and maybe in the original days, a defense installation or NASA or somebody like that on the other side of the planet, and they had their own networks. But it would be great if a computer on one of those networks could communicate with a computer on another network. And so the internet was developed as a means to make that happen. It was a common protocol that was used that meant that there was a common language that these different networks could use to communicate with each other. Because before then, each of them was its own separate network. Now, with payment systems, we have the same thing. So looking at Interledger, if we just look at, these are just some slides from a talk. Those are not showing up. What is going on here? 1 second. For some reason, that is not showing up the I seem to be having a lot of technology problems today. For some reason this was working just now and then it stopped working. Now I've restarted it. Hello Kung Fu Nerd. Move the image to the top list of sources. It normally works pretty well. I normally have should switch to Firefox, and it was doing it earlier, and now for some reason now it's decided not to, so just bear with me a second. Okay, that looks like that may have done it. I had to switch back and forth for some reason. Anyway, so these are some slides from a Interledger workshop in Berlin in 2017, and I'm going to pinch a couple of their slides here because they illustrate it very well. So accepting payments online. If we're just talking about payments online in general, you want to be able to pay somebody some money for some service. Well, there's all these different ways of doing it. Lots of different payment mechanisms, both the traditional sort of card-based ones, plus sort of online digital methods and things like PayPal. So no, blockchain will not solve the problem in and of itself. So talking about blockchain and talking about distributed ledger technology, those do not in it themselves solve the problem of interoperability. If I want to use XRP and you want to use Bitcoin, how can I pay you? How do we, we have this situation where we've got to somehow negotiate a common payment mechanism before we can actually transfer value. So, and if you look at it in a wider context, you have banks, you have blockchains, you have mobile money, you have online wallets, and they're all separate payment networks and they're disconnected from each other. You can't take a payment from a bank and send it through to a blockchain to end up on a mobile money system or an online wallet. So the idea is this concept that's been mentioned before a lot by people within Ripple and the XRP community and the ILP community about the Internet of Value. And so, can you connect everything through to one blockchain? Well, in short, no, you can't. Nobody's going to agree on one particular blockchain. As people know who have been involved in cryptocurrency a lot, there's a lot of tribalism. There's a lot of people who want one particular technology over another for whatever reason, be it some favoritism, or if there is actually technical capabilities. There's going to be different priorities that are set by different blockchains for different functionalities, and it might be that one blockchain is better suited to one thing, another blockchain is better suited to another thing. So we're never going to agree on one ledger. And the idea behind the Internet of Value, internetworking, I mentioned before about the internet and about routing data. This is what Interledger is trying to do. But rather than routing data, we're going to be looking at routing money. So how do you get money between two different places, especially if they have different mechanisms for accepting money? So at the moment, like I said, if I use XRP and I want to send some value to somebody who uses Ethereum, I can't. We've got to agree on a common cryptocurrency to use. Or if I'm with one particular bank, I'm with Lloyds Bank in the UK and you're with Citibank in Singapore, how do I send payments to you? Well, it has to go via some intermediate network. So there's a payment protocol that's used, SWIFT, for example, between banks, and that is another mechanism by which these payment requests are made. But it's just the request for the payment. It's not the actual payment, just to be clear here with SWIFT. It communicates that somebody wants to pay somebody else, but it doesn't actually transfer the money itself. With cryptocurrencies, digital assets, we can actually transfer the value itself. So Interledger is this protocol that's come out of this, and the idea being to allow interconnecting of different networks. So at the moment, if you want to send a payment through the sort of traditional correspondent banking system, this is where one bank sends some money to a larger bank, that bank sends it on to a bank on the other side of the globe that it already has a relationship with, and then money is passed on to the final destination. Well, you have this sort of multi-hop process in which payment gets moved from one bank to another bank to another bank, and at some point in the process it might fail. And if it fails, well, that's a problem. The money's kind of got halfway through and got stuck and now has to somehow be returned, and you have to deal with, okay, how do we deal with that? Well, with cryptocurrencies, we have the advantage that we have mathematics on our side. We can solve a lot of these things via using various cryptographic primitives that some of these networks have. So Interledger has what's called this two-phase commit to secure multi-hops, in which you have this prepare phase in which certain data kind of goes from the start to the destination, and then the execute, in which it effectively executes in reverse order and unlocks all of the transactions. So effectively the payments are put in escrow going forward, and then they're unlocked as it comes backwards. And if any particular payment fails, then the whole thing just unwinds and the money is back where it started. So that's the kind of the concepts that Interledger uses to mean that the money is safe as it goes from one point to another point. And what it means is you don't have to actually trust the intermediate connections. So if I want to send some money from my network to your network, well, there might not be a direct route, and it might be that there's intermediates in the way, and it might traverse through several different points before it gets there. And how do you deal with that if you don't trust those points? Well, the Interledger Protocol deals with that via these cryptographic functions that we have within networks to do with escrow, what are called hash locks. And these hash locks are used to basically guarantee that the money is going to get to where it needs to go. So the network graph, for example, here's so Adrian Hope Bailey, he's one of the sort of main people that's been working on Interledger and the sort of co-chair of this W3C group, the Web Payments Working Group, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit because that's quite interesting. And so here's this sort of network graph, and each one of these points here that starts, if I make this a little bit bigger, starts with a G, is a point on the network. So the view from his network, G Hope Bailey, he can reach G Siren via this other one, G Hope Bailey dot something else, McGovern, G Feraltic, G Ciela, and then G Siren. And so these are the different hops that it would take, and the payment would go from one to another to get to the final destination. And that's exactly what happens on the internet in general with data. I send data from my computer to my local network provider, TalkTalk. They then send it on to another provider, and eventually it ends up in your computer. And my network provider doesn't have to have a relationship with yours. It will just find a path en route between the different network providers, and that's how it'll get there. So Interledger is trying to do the same thing with money. Now, a thing to note here is the Interledger itself, ILP, is not a blockchain. It is not a ledger. All it is a simple mechanism to transfer, an agreed way to transfer value between different ledgers. And as I said, those ledgers, because the Interledger Protocol is quite simple, it is designed to work with all sorts of ledgers. So they could be blockchains, they could be traditional bank ledgers, they could be mobile money providers. So if you look at things like M-Pesa in Kenya, that's a very successful mobile money wallet, but it only works within Kenya. So there are many other local currencies with all the other African countries that it can't interact with. So each one of them is kind of a separate silo. And the idea behind Interledger could be that payments could go from one system to another system, and not just blockchain-based systems, but mobile money systems, traditional bank systems as well. And in fact, things like the XRP tip bot. The XRP tip bot also is an Interledger endpoint on here. So anybody who has an account on the XRP tip bot, which is basically anybody who uses Twitter or Reddit or Discord can use it, then you will have a Interledger address at the XRP tip bot, and that will be your $, I think it's twitter.xrptipbot.com/ and your username, so mine will be /Hamato, and that means that it can send me payment to that. So actually Coil, at the moment my account is Coil enabled, and you can't see it because it's just off the bottom of the screen here, but Coil is, whilst I'm on this page, is already sending money from me to the XRP Tipbot account as a sort of donation to the Tipbot. And Coil sends money to the XRP Tipbot, but it could be a payment pointer on any other network. It doesn't have to be XRP. As long as there's a connector somewhere in the network that can translate XRP to whatever other cryptocurrency or even traditional currency, then you could use that as well. So in your Coil profile, so Coil, for those that don't know, Coil is a kind of an all-you-can-eat mechanism for monetizing content. The idea being is that I pay a $5, I think it is, a month subscription to Coil, and whenever I visit certain websites, Coil will send money to those websites. So if I go to distributed agreement, David Schwartz's blog, then the Coil is donating money to it, and it'll show it up here. You see this number here is slowly increasing in the top right, and that is it donating money to David Schwartz on my behalf. And so this is a way of monetizing the internet, and I did a video a couple of weeks ago on Coil itself. But Coil is using the Interledger Protocol. So whilst it is sending money here, and you see this little $sign here, and it's sending money in what looks like dollars, in fact it could end up in any currency for any payment provider or payment pointer that's connected to Interledger. So if we go into my Coil profile, we should see here, where is it? Settings, account. Monetize content. Here we go. Monetize content. Payment pointer. So this is the bit here. Twitter, XRP, Tipbot, Hamato. So any payment that comes in. So if you're a Coil subscriber and you're watching this video right now on YouTube, it should be streaming me some small amount of XRP to my XRP Tipbot account. But it doesn't have to be XRP. Like I said, it could be a Bitcoin account or even a US dollar account connected to Interledger. Now we're not quite there yet. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any actual commercial fiat gateways onto the Interledger network at the moment, but no doubt they will be coming. And if we go back to the XRP Tipbot, we'll probably see down the bottom here, if I go to ILP Coil, we'll see there's some payments that are coming in sort of live at the moment as I'm doing this talk, and that's what Coil does. So, but Coil is based upon Interledger, and so it uses the same protocol and can send it to everything. So, just looking at some of the comments here. So, Clara asks, Matt, is the Interledger and Internet of Value interchangeable terms? Not quite. The idea of the Internet of Value is a wider concept. The idea of the Internet of Value is we should be able to send money as easily as we can send information. It shouldn't take 3 days for money to get from A to B. I currently tried to do a arbitrage trade on some XRP, and I currently have a slightly sizable sum of money stuck somewhere in Swift, halfway between my bank account and GateHub at the moment, and it will arrive there at some point within the next 7 days. I'm not exactly sure when, maybe 4 days, who knows. But it shouldn't be that difficult. You know, we should be able to get payment across the planet as easily as we can send an email. So that's the idea of the Internet of Value. ILP is a technology that's enabling that. So ILP is a specific technological standard that helps do that. So hopefully that answers your question there. Darren Corrine asks, are there any other companies successfully using and developing an ILP besides Ripple you know of? So developing another Interledger protocol, do you mean? As in a protocol similar but different? Not that I'm aware of. There are some that are tied to specific blockchains. So there's something, there's an Ethereum one, I can't remember the name of it now, but there's an Ethereum one that works just, I think, within Ethereum, kind of doing cross-chain, what are called cross-chain atomic swaps. So I'm not sure if that's quite the same thing, because it's just really within one chain. So I don't think anybody's doing anything quite the same as Interledger. Who's using Interledger, if that's what you mean? Like I say, Coil are, Ripple are. Ripple are using it for all their underlying banking stuff. xCurrent, that uses ILP. So when you see American Express say they use Ripple, they're using ILP. That's what's being used under the hood to send payments from one ledger to another. So another question here from Henrik. I just need to catch up here. Let me just... questions are coming in fairly quickly here. I've missed a few of them, so I'm just scrolling up a second. So Henrik asks, can Coil be set up for YouTube? Yes, Coil can be set up for YouTube. So I've got it enabled on here. So if you go into Coil and go into monetize content, you can go and you can associate your YouTube channel. So I've done mine there. So that should mean that anybody with a Coil subscription that's watching me right now will be live streaming a small amount of money to my account as a result of that. So Clara asks as well about Hyperledger and Hyperledger merge. Okay, so Hyperledger is a distributed ledger, a bit like the XRP ledger, but that is designed It's a permissioned, mainly a permissioned ledger. One of the big proponents of it is IBM, and IBM are using Hyperledger for various blockchain products. So if you ever see IBM talk about blockchain, they're generally talking about Hyperledger. So when they talk about, recently they've been talking about using blockchain to track fresh produce moving worldwide or shipping containers, that's Hyperledger. So Hyperledger is an open source distributed ledger. It's part of the I think it's part of the Apache Software Foundation, I think, and that's what Hyperledger is. Within Hyperledger, there is a product called Hyperledger Quilt, and Hyperledger Quilt is what is actually ILP. So you should be able to send some value from Hyperledger through to, say, the XRP ledger using Hyperledger Quilt, because that will connect via ILP, and that's how you'll be able to bridge the two. So hopefully that explains that. So Kung Fu Nerd, yeah, anyone with YouTube can monetize Coil real now. It's as easy as signing with the YouTube API. Exactly, it's fantastic. It's really simple, and it's great. So Mr. Pace here because of Kung Fu Nerd. Thank you very much, and thank you Kung Fu Nerd for bringing along some of your viewers. That's great. The IOV, Clara, the IOV of concept Interledger is a protocol. Got it. Yes, IOV is a concept. Interledger is a protocol that implements that concept. So that's the idea behind it. So Interledger goes even further in the fact that you can use Interledger. So like I said, it's a whole series of protocols, and all the technical descriptions of the protocols, the definitions are all defined online. Anybody can see them and anybody can implement them. They're what's called open standards, which means anybody can deal with them. And all of the actual technical details you would need as a developer, not as an end user, as a developer, to implement Interledger Protocol are available. But one of the things that Interledger Protocol has is a protocol built on top of it. This is part of what's called Interledger version 4, Interledger v4, is a thing called Stream. Now, Stream allows you to send both data and payment at the same time. So there was a demo of this using, which was it, Quake, I think, the shoot 'em up game. And on top of that was using Interledger and Stream, such that whenever you got killed in the game, you lost a bit of money. Whenever you killed somebody else, you got a bit of money. It was run on a test net, and it was kind of a bit of fun and a proof of concept, but that was the kind of idea there. But Stream could be used to actually send payment along with data. So if you have a website that allows you to store photos, then as the photo is being uploaded, along with the photo could be the payment request as well. So you have both the payment and the data interlinked together. So you don't have to worry about, okay, I've sent this data, now somebody needs to pay for it. Because that's always a problem in designing systems. Because it's a case of, well, do I ask for the payment first? Do I ask for the payment afterwards? What if the payment fails but I've sent them the data? What if they've paid but the data doesn't get through? And in most cases, the actual cost of collecting a payment is fairly significant. So you can't just collect, 10 cents or 20 cents from somebody. You have to collect $5 or $20 because it's going to cost you 50 cents or $1 or whatever it is to process that payment. So if the payment cost is high, then you can't do really, really small payments. So Stream allows you to do the payment, just tiny little micro payments as part of the data. So you could be watching, say, whatever streaming video service like Netflix, and it could be paying as the video is coming down. And if you think about it at the moment, the main reason you need to sign up to some service and give them your name and email address and choose a password and set a login details and all that is because you're going to give them payment. That is generally the only reason. So if you no longer need to do that, then you no longer need to have the whole rigmarole of a username and password. Just send the payment. Now, one of the classic examples that David Schwartz gives is, what if my computer could pay for Wi-Fi directly wherever I am? Now, anybody who's traveled around will know this scenario. You get to another country, different airport, a hotel, you open your computer, what Wi-Fi networks are around, you join one that says, okay, you need an account on this system. Well, that's fine if you live there because you might have that set up. But if you're traveling around, why do I want to set up an account on some random Wi-Fi network in Germany and then another random one in Korea and then another random one in Australia when I'm only going to be there a short amount of time? What if instead my computer could pay for the Wi-Fi connection as it is being used? Literally for the seconds that I'm connected. As soon as I disconnect, the payment stops. I reconnect, the payment starts. I don't need a username and password. I don't need an account. They don't need to know who I am because they've already got the payment. As I'm using the service, the payment is coming through. So it opens up a whole new class of business models for payments that just were not possible before. And don't just think about what payments we could replace at the moment, but think about all the ones that are just not possible right now because you can't collect that payment because it's too expensive to. Now, being very topical here, David Schwartz is at Money 2020 in Las Vegas, and about 2 hours ago, he stood up and, in a sort of a debate with somebody about blockchain and talking about Interledger, and was saying this exact thing. Don't think about what payment mechanisms we're going to replace, but think about the new ones that are just so far have not been possible. It's not been possible for me to be able to pay somebody to, do a small little bit of artwork that might take them, 5 minutes to do, a little sketch or a cartoon or something. It might take them 5 minutes to do that. But that's not a business model when, if it takes them 5 minutes to do it, but it takes them another 5 minutes to collect payment, or they want to sell that 5-minute doodle for $1, but it's going to cost them 50 cents to collect that dollar. It just doesn't make economic sense. And Interledger could change that whole dynamic by making it really simple and easy to collect micropayments. And again, in any cryptocurrency or any other currency. And it might be that if you're connecting to a fiat network and you want to send US dollars or pounds sterling or euros, that those might be, again, too expensive to do small payments. But you could have some connector that buffers the payments and then takes a large payment. And that's effectively what Coil are doing. Coil take $5 a month and they then pay out a bunch of tiny little bits of XRP throughout the month as you go along. Because they've worked out that it would be easier to collect $5 a month because that's what people, the vast majority of people are using fiat currencies. So, you and I are possibly using cryptocurrencies for certain things. We'll be comfortable paying directly with something like Bitcoin or XRP. But the vast majority of people don't, and they want to pay with a credit card because that's what they're used to. So they can pay their $5 a month. Coil then pay out small little bits as you go along. So let's look at some of the other things here. I've talked about streaming money and data over ILP. This has all got very large. But this is another blog post. Evan Schwartz, he's the co-inventor of Interledger. He's got some great, if you look at any of the Interledger, go onto the Interledger blog on Medium. There's loads of really good articles. So some of them are quite technical and actually talking about how you set this stuff up. Again, as an end user, you don't need to know this. This is for people who want to actually get their hands dirty messing around with it. But the great thing being is you can do. If you want to set this up, you can do. And another interesting one as well from Evan Schwartz is this blog post about the graveyard of possible protocol features. As I mentioned, ILP is a very simple protocol. And actually they went through and they talk about here 12 particular features that all were kind of killed as ideas. And that's because they wanted to keep things as simple and as universal as possible. They wanted this to work with traditional bank networks. They wanted it to work with cryptocurrency. They wanted it to work with mobile networks. So Cosmos, that's the Ethereum one that I was trying to think of earlier when somebody was asking about other Interledger protocols. So Cosmos is a Ethereum-based one, I think, which allows different ledgers to interoperate. But it does a lot more. It's not just a straightforward mechanism of communicating between them. It's a whole other sort of ledger system in itself. But the great thing being is they looked at all of these things, and these are all things that they took out. And if anybody is where there's a fantastic, I think, sort of Japanese sort of mantra that perfection is not achieved when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And that is really what I think is happening with Interledger, that they have sort of pared this right down to the simplest they can to say, okay, we want this to just do one simple thing and one simple thing well. So there we go. Robert Lee. Great to see you, Robert. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, glad we can help. So what other things did I bring up here? Some more stuff about Interledger. Oh yeah, ILP. So like I said, ILP is the basis for Ripple's xCurrent product. So you will have one bank trying to send something through to another bank on the other side here, and using Ripple's xCurrent, or what was called Ripple Connect is now predominantly xCurrent, they can use this ILP ledger to go through and make the connections through to the end beneficiary bank. So whenever you see xCurrent mentioned, whenever you see Ripple talking about 200 banking partners using xCurrent, that's using ILP underneath in order to do that. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to cover here. So the Interledger site has got some information about it. Again, there's some technical stuff here on, you know, how you would actually implement something with Interledger. So if you want to actually develop something that is going to receive payment or send payment on Interledger, then you could use that. And the great thing again is that Interledger accounts, Interledger addresses are kind of human readable, a bit like email addresses. So I showed you the one for the XRP tip bot. So that's the address there. $twitter.xrptipbot.com/Hamato. That's the address for somebody to send payment to, and it will get to me, right? They don't have to know that great long nasty hexadecimal string that is my wallet address. They don't have to even know what wallet it is. They can just send payment through to there. So eventually soon we should have cryptocurrency wallets that will have ILP built directly into it. And I know that Tiff Hayden for a while was working with one of the cryptocurrency wallet providers who was Edge, what was Airbit's Edge, and was trying to convince them to use ILP and be, you know, connecting with ILP. The owner of the company didn't quite get it, unfortunately, and I don't think understood exactly what the benefit would be. But think about it. If you have a wallet in which you can just put in an ILP address and send payment, and it doesn't matter what currency it is, you know, there's no knowledge here that this is XRP that is received in this, apart from the fact that the domain name happens to be XRP Tipbot. But it could be anything. I could set up my own ILP gateway on my own domain, and you know, you wouldn't know what currency I'm actually receiving. You could just send me currency, and it would be translated by the ILP network. At some point it will find a route, and if it doesn't, it will fail. And at the moment there's not, you know, that many routes on the network, but they are growing continuously, and with network effects, every new connector that comes in means another route, and that builds upon more routes and more routes and more routes. And so payment will go from one hop to another hop to another hop to another hop until it gets to the end. So Clara's asked, would I be so kind to put those links in the description? Yes, I will do. I'll put them on here as well, and we'll have that on there. Oh, Clara's mentioned, yeah, Into the Trolls Den video. Yeah, okay. That was a video in which I ended up talking on audio with a bunch of Bitcoin maximalists, which got quite heated, shall we say. But it was very interesting to kind of talk to them in their home ground and see what their thoughts were on things. But that yeah, that video's I think on this channel, or if not on my personal channel. I might not have put it on this one, but that's up there as well. So hopefully that has given people an idea about Interledger. Like I said, the idea was a kind of a hand wavy, kind of high level overview. I wasn't going to go into the nuts and bolts of it, but the idea being to just show what it is and why it is there. So it's a protocol, it's a specification to allow different networks to communicate value, for you to be able to send value from one ledger to another ledger, be that a bank ledger, a cryptocurrency ledger, a blockchain, a mobile money network, whatever. That's the idea behind it, and I think it's going to be fairly revolutionary. It kind of shows some of the mentality of the folks at Ripple, where they said, look, no one blockchain is going to rule them all, because people want different things. You can't please everybody. You can't create a system that is going to fit every single requirement. A new technology is going to come along. There could be another cryptocurrency that is better than Bitcoin, that is better than XRP, that's better than Ethereum, Digibyte, whatever, that blows everybody away. And if everything is implemented using ILP, then you should just be able to plug that in and away you go. And you don't have to then rebuild everything specific to that network. That's the idea. So, are there any more questions, or does anybody want me to cover anything else? I'm kind of coming up to sort of 40 minutes or so, a little bit shorter than some of the other shows, but try not to waffle on too much. So if there's any questions, then ask them now. If not, then feel free to ask them in the comments on YouTube, and I'll answer them on there. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. No, okay. I never quite know, because there's a bit of a lag, I know, between me speaking and you hearing it and me getting the stuff back. So, Kung Fu Nerd, do you know if Stellar Foundation is working with ILP at all? Good question. No idea. I would love it if they would. Now, the interesting thing, as I mentioned, is that IBM are heavily involved in Hyperledger. They're also heavily involved in Stellar. And Hyperledger has a product called Hyperledger Quilt, and Hyperledger Quilt is an ILP implementation. So, Hyperledger Quilt is a project as part of the Hyperledger sort of thing. And there we go. Hyperledger Quilt offers interoperability between ledger systems by implementing the Interledger Protocol, also known as ILP. So there we go. That's how you can use ILP with Hyperledger. So whether or not there's anything to do with ILP and Stellar, I don't know. Let's Google and see if anybody's done it. Doesn't look like it as far as I can see on here. Just a quick look through. I don't see anything that jumps out at me that seems to suggest they are. But there's no technical reason why not. I think they have all the facilities on. I think they've got escrow facilities on Stellar. If they've got escrow facilities, well, I know they've got some smart contract facilities, so that should be enough for them to do the hash locks on there that are needed to ensure that the funds get through and back again. So yeah, you should be able to create a ILP adapter for Stellar, and it would probably be fairly similar to the Ripple one, because they're fairly similar networks, and that should work. Ike Around asks, are cryptos programmable? Good question. Depends on what you mean by are cryptos programmable. There are programmable features that are implemented in certain blockchains. So Bitcoin has a thing called xCode, I think it's called, and Ethereum has their Solidarity programming language that can use to code things. Now, Ripple created a smart contract system called Codius, and this actually ties in with this actually a little bit, in that Ripple were working on Codius, and Codius is a sort of a smart contract system, and they actually stopped working on it because they didn't want to tie Codius directly into one ledger. So at the moment, if you develop a smart contract on Ethereum, you have to develop it in Ethereum's language Solidarity, and it can only do what the Ethereum specification allows it to do. If you wanted to do something else, you're out of luck. So Ripple wanted to create this thing called Codius, and they wanted Codius to be able to do more than what Ethereum could do, for example. But they didn't want to tie it to one particular ledger. So the question was, well, how do you get payment to it? And the thing that was missing was Interledger. So Codius got put on hold until Interledger was fully developed. Then when Interledger was fully developed, they picked up Codius again. And so Codius allows you to take payment in Ethereum, Bitcoin, XRP, whatever, whatever's connected to ILP, because you actually connect Codius to the ILP network, not directly to the XRP ledger. And so it can take payment in many different cryptocurrencies. And that allows you to do sort of programming with code, and allows you to do smart contracts. So for instance, you could develop a lottery in which everybody sends funds to a particular address, and when a certain threshold is reached, a random person is picked and all the funds are sent out to that one person. And that could be entirely controlled by the smart contract without any human intervention in. So Bob said, I'll need to watch this again. A lot went over my head. Okay, Bob, well, feel free to watch it again. And if you need anything clarified, seriously, just ask questions in the YouTube comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions. As well as that, my idea with this series of talks that I do, this Cryptocurrency Explained talks, I will cover things multiple times. So I did a talk about Coil a few weeks ago, and I mentioned some of the bits about Interledger. I've gone over them again here talking about this. So you might want to look at the Coil video from a few weeks ago. And no doubt I'll be covering some of these topics again, building on them in later videos. So you could do different, you see it hopefully from different viewpoints, different contexts, and maybe then it'll make some more sense as well. So, okay, and great. Thank you very much for everybody. And like I said, any comments, put them in the comments thing. Yeah, I've got to do the YouTube begging, like, subscribe, etc., because that then gives me the power to do certain things on the channel when I reach a certain number of subscribers. So please do that. It also gives me some feedback of what shows people are liking, and gives me a warm fuzzy feeling to continue doing them. So thank you very much for everybody for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Okay, goodbye.